Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at something might seem a little surprising at first,
Okay.
how repetition can actually help make you a better problem solver,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to coding.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh,
Yeah, we tend to think of repetition as something kind of dull and boring,
right.
but it can be a really powerful tool when it comes to mastering complex skills.
Yeah. For this deep dive, we're looking at an article from the Algo Academy blog.
Okay.
It's called The Importance of Repetition in Building Problem-Solving Skills.
Right.
I have to admit, when I first saw the title, I thought, well, duh,
Uh-huh.
practice makes perfect.
Yeah,
But it goes way deeper than that.
it really does.
Yeah.
Think of it this way.
Okay.
Every time you repeat a task,
Mm-hmm.
was working through a coding problem,
Right.
you're actually changing your brain.
Whoa.
Like you're strengthening these connections, these neural pathways,
Okay.
and that makes it easier to recall and apply that knowledge later.
So it's not just about memorizing code.
No,
It's about building some sort of mental muscle memory for problem solving.
exactly.
Interesting.
And it's interesting to think about this in the context of
Yeah.
the 4 stages of competence model.
Right.
You know how you start as a beginner,
Hmm.
feeling a bit lost, overwhelmed,
For sure.
and then with repetition, you can actually move through those stages,
Yeah.
become more competent
Right.
until coding becomes
Mhm.
almost second nature to you.
I can definitely relate to that.
Okay.
I remember when I first started learning about data structures, it felt like a completely foreign language.
Uh,
But the more I practiced, the more those concepts started to click.
yeah. And as you keep practicing, you start to recognize patterns in code,
Uh-huh.
just like you might recognize patterns in a song
Yeah.
or in a piece of art.
Pattern recognition.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yep.
It's like the more you practice, the faster you can spot those familiar bits of code.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out how they fit together.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's a crucial skill for any coder.
Right.
It helps you to break down problems more efficiently and come up with solutions more intuitively.
Makes sense.
It's like you're building this toolbox
Mm.
of problem-solving techniques.
So I get that repetition is important, but I think we've all had that experience of just doing the same thing over and over again
Yeah.
and feeling like we're not really making progress.
Mm-hmm.
How do we make sure that the repetition we're doing is actually effective?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
There are some specific techniques you can use to make your repetition more impactful.
I'm all ears.
Okay, so one of the most effective techniques is called spaced repetition.
Spaced repetition.
Have you ever heard of that?
It sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Is that the one where you space out your practice sessions over time?
You got it.
Okay.
It's all about revisiting concepts at increasing intervals.
Mm-hmm.
So you might solve a problem today,
Right.
and you come back to it a few days later,
Okay.
and then again after a week or so.
So kind of like how those flashcard apps work for learning languages.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy.
You see a word and then it pops up again later to make
Mhm.
sure you really remember it.
It's all about strategically spacing out your practice
Okay.
to help move information from your short-term memory to your long-term memory.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
So it's not just about cramming, it's about finding that sweet spot
right.
for revisiting concepts.
Hmm.
Are there any other techniques that can help?
Another powerful technique is called varied practice.
Varied practice.
So instead of just solving the same problem over and over again,
Right.
you try tackling similar problems,
Okay.
but with slight twists or variations.
So instead of just doing the same binary search problem 10 times in a row,
Yeah,
I might try a variation where the array is rotated.
exactly. By introducing these variations,
Yeah.
you're forcing yourself to think more critically
Okay.
and adapt your knowledge to different contexts.
That's a great point. I can see how that would help me understand the underlying concept more deeply,
Hmm.
rather than just memorizing a specific solution.
That's the key.
Okay.
Moving beyond rote memorization to genuine understanding.
And another technique.
And another technique I like is to try implementing multiple solutions
Okay.
for the same problem.
For the same problem.
So you could start with a brute force approach
Mm-hmm.
and then see if you can optimize it
Right.
with a more elegant algorithm.
So it's like comparing different tools in a toolbox.
Exactly.
You might have a hammer that can get the job done,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes a screwdriver is a better choice.
Right, by exploring multiple approaches.
Right.
You get a better sense of the trade-offs.
Uh-huh.
You broaden your problem-solving toolkit.
Okay.
So you're not just learning one way to solve a problem, you're learning a whole range of approaches.
That's really helpful. So we've got spaced repetition, varied practice,
Mhm.
trying out multiple solutions. Are there any other tips you can share before we move on?
One more thing that can be incredibly beneficial is to actually write down your thought process
Okay.
as you're solving problems.
Yeah.
You could keep a coding journal
Right.
or even start a blog.
Oh, I like that idea.
Yeah,
It's almost like having a training log for your brain.
exactly. It can help you identify patterns in your thinking,
Mm-hmm.
see where you're getting stuck,
Right.
and even track your progress over time.
That's cool.
It's a great way to reflect on your learning
Yeah.
and solidify your understanding.
Okay, so we've talked about the why and the how of repetition, but what about the tools?
Yeah.
There must be some awesome resources out there that can help us put all this into practice.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The digital age has provided us with so many amazing
Yeah.
tools. Things like LeetCode, HackerRank, Codecademy.
I've heard of those.
Yeah,
They're like virtual gyms for coding, right?
that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
You can track your progress,
Yeah.
see how others have solved the same problem,
Okay.
and even get feedback on your code.
It's like having a built-in support system for your coding journey.
Exactly.
That sounds awesome, and I'm guessing version control systems like Git can also play a role in this?
Definitely.
Okay.
Version control is like keeping a detailed training log for your code.
Mm-hmm.
You can track your changes, go back to previous versions,
Right.
and even experiment with different solutions without worrying about breaking things.
It's like having a safety net for your code.
Exactly.
So you can be more adventurous and try out different approaches.
Mhm.
I love that.
And the cool thing is that all of these tools and techniques
Yeah.
can not only make you a better coder,
Mm-hmm.
but they can also help you stand out during those nerve-wracking technical interviews.
Oh, right.
You know.
Technical interviews. Those
Yeah.
can be pretty intense. How does all of this repetition help us prepare for those?
Well, by practicing consistently,
Yeah.
you're building that problem-solving toolkit
Okay.
we talked about.
Right.
You'll be able to recognize problem types more quickly, implement solutions more efficiently,
Okay.
and even handle those tricky edge cases with more confidence.
So it's like how athletes train under pressure to perform better on game day.
You're exactly right.
Right.
It's about training your brain to think clearly and effectively under pressure.
Yeah.
Plus, the more you practice explaining your code,
Mm-hmm.
the more articulate you'll become
Yeah.
during those technical interviews.
That's a great point. Communication is key in any technical role.
Yeah,
So repetition helps you become a better coder and a better communicator.
that's win-win.
It's a win-win, but let's be real for a second.
Okay,
Sticking to a consistent practice routine can be tough.
it can be.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how to overcome some of those challenges.
I think that's a great place to shift our focus.
Okay.
You know, repetition takes effort, and it's important to acknowledge that
Yeah.
there will be bumps along the way.
Okay, so let's talk about those bumps. What are some of the biggest challenges people face when it comes to repetition, and how can we overcome them?
Well, one of the most common challenges is boredom.
Boredom.
Doing the same type of problem over and over again can get really tedious.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that sometimes. I feel like I'm just going through the motions. What do you suggest?
One thing you can try is to switch up the types of problems you're working on.
Okay.
So you could explore a new area of coding
Uh-huh.
or challenge yourself to solve a familiar problem in a different programming language.
So kind of like cross-training for your brain.
Exactly.
I like that.
And another common challenge is hitting a plateau.
Hitting a plateau.
You might feel like you're not making any progress no matter how much you practice.
I think we've all been there at some point.
Well,
What's the best way to get unstuck?
when you hit a plateau, it's important to reassess your goals
Okay.
and your approach.
Mm-hmm.
Are you challenging yourself enough?
Right.
Are you seeking feedback from others?
Okay.
Are you celebrating your small wins along the way?
Those are all great points. Sometimes we get so focused on the end goal that we forget to appreciate the progress we've made.
That's so true.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that learning is a journey, not a destination.
Right.
There'll be ups and downs, twists
Mhm.
and turns.
For sure.
The key is to embrace the process and enjoy the ride.
I love that, embracing the process. I think that's a perfect note to end this part of our deep dive on.
I agree, we've covered a lot of ground,
We have.
but there's still much more to explore.
Stay tuned, because in part 2, we'll be diving even deeper into the unexpected ways that repetition can impact our lives,
Right.
far beyond the world of coding.
Looking forward to it.
Me too.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the power of repetition.
Yeah, before the break, we were really focused on how repetition can really kind of like sharpen your coding skills, make you a better problem solver.
Yeah.
But it's
Mhm.
really fascinating how the benefits of repetition go way beyond just tech.
Absolutely.
It's true. I think we've all been told at some point that repetition is boring or mindless. But when you really look at it, it's a core part of how we learn and grow in so many areas of our lives.
You're absolutely right. I mean,
Yeah.
think about it. Repetition is how we build habits,
Right,
both the good and the not so good.
right.
It's how we get really good at things, from playing an instrument to speaking another language.
Mm-hmm.
And it's even how we develop our ability to think critically.
Okay, I'm curious about that. How does repeating things help us become better critical thinkers? I'm not sure I quite see the connection there.
Yeah, it's a subtle connection, but it's definitely there.
Okay.
So when you repeat a task or keep going back to an idea,
Yeah.
you're not just passively taking in information.
Mm-hmm.
You're actively engaging with it. You're looking at it from different angles. You're searching for patterns and connections.
Right.
And it's that process of repeated exposure and analysis
Okay.
that strengthens your critical thinking muscles.
So it's like you're training your brain to ask questions, to challenge assumptions, to look beyond the surface of things, even in everyday situations.
Exactly. And that kind of thinking is so important in today's world.
Right.
You know, we're bombarded with information from all sides.
For sure.
We need those critical thinking skills
Right.
to filter through all the noise, figure out what's truly important, and make good decisions.
It's not enough to just passively absorb information anymore.
Right.
We need to be able to really think about what we're reading, what we're hearing, what we're seeing online and in the real world.
Exactly. And here's something that might surprise you.
Okay.
Repetition can actually spark creativity too.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
I always thought creativity was about breaking free from repetition, about thinking outside the box.
Yeah, that's a common misconception.
Okay.
But it's important to distinguish between mindless repetition
Mm-hmm.
and what we call deliberate practice.
Okay.
So when you're practicing deliberately, you're pushing yourself beyond what's comfortable, you're experimenting, and you're always looking for ways to improve.
So it's like jazz musicians riffing on a familiar melody. They've got that solid foundation of musical knowledge.
Yeah.
But they use that as a launching pad for improvisation and creativity.
That's a fantastic analogy. So
Yeah.
the repetition provides a structure, a framework
Yeah.
that you can then build upon and experiment with.
Okay.
By engaging with a skill or a concept over and over again,
Mm-hmm.
you gain this deep understanding that opens up new possibilities and helps you to make those creative connections.
I never thought of repetition as a path to creativity before,
Yeah.
but it makes a lot of sense when you put it that way.
It's one of those hidden benefits
Right.
that often gets overlooked. And the best part is you can apply these principles to any part of your life,
Okay.
not just the arts or creative fields.
Okay, so how about some real-world examples?
Yeah.
How can we use repetition to handle these everyday challenges we all face?
Let's take something as simple as making decisions.
Okay.
I mean, we make tons of decisions every day, big and small. And by consistently analyzing how we make those decisions,
Mhm.
we can start to see patterns,
Right.
learn from our mistakes,
Mm.
and ultimately make better choices.
So it's about becoming more aware of our own biases, our tendencies, so that we can make more conscious and informed decisions.
Precisely, repetition can also help us build resilience.
What? Resilient.
When we hit roadblocks and setbacks,
Yeah,
it's easy to get discouraged and want to give up.
right.
But if we've built up that habit of persistence through repetition,
Yeah.
we're much more likely to bounce back from adversity.
It's like the saying, fall down 7 times, stand up 8.
Exactly.
Each time we face a challenge and get through it,
Mm-hmm.
we're strengthening our resilience, preparing ourselves for whatever comes next.
Exactly. And let's not forget about relationships.
Okay, relationships, how does that tie in?
Think about how we learn to communicate effectively with the people we care about.
Okay.
It takes time.
Mm-hmm.
It takes patience. It takes a lot of back and forth, a lot of repetition to really understand each other's needs, preferences, and communication styles.
It's like we're learning a new language,
Mhm.
but instead of words, we're trying to understand each other's emotional language.
That's such a great point.
Yeah,
And that takes practice and patience, just like learning any other skill.
yeah. The more we practice communicating with empathy and understanding, the stronger those connections become,
Absolutely.
whether it's in our romantic relationships, friendships, or even at work.
Right.
I'm seeing a pattern here. It seems like repetition isn't just about memorizing facts or doing drills.
Mm.
It's about deliberately practicing, putting in the effort to gain mastery in all parts of our lives.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
It's about using the power of repetition to grow, to learn, and to become the best versions of ourselves.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what's the key to really unlocking the potential of repetition? How can we make sure we're using it effectively?
I think the answer lies in being mindful, being intentional, and being willing to embrace the process. We need to be aware of the areas where repetition can help us.
Right.
And then be deliberate about how we incorporate it into our lives.
And it's also about remembering that true mastery doesn't happen overnight.
No, it doesn't.
It takes time, effort, and a lot of repetition.
It does.
And there will be times when we get frustrated, bored, or even experience setbacks.
Yeah, those are all part of the process.
But by embracing the journey, by trusting that all those repetitions are gradually shaping us into the people we want to become, we can tap into the transformative power of this often overlooked principle.
That's true.
This has been so eye-opening. I feel like I have a whole new appreciation for the value of repetition.
That's wonderful to hear. And in our final segment, we'll explore some concrete strategies for applying these principles to achieve your goals and aspirations.
I can't wait.
All right.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been on quite a journey today exploring the power of repetition.
It really has been fascinating, hasn't it? Yeah, from coding to creativity to even building stronger relationships. Who knew repetition was so versatile?
It's truly remarkable how it weaves its way into so many aspects of our lives.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious.
Yeah.
What are some of the most important takeaways?
Well, I think the key is to remember that repetition is not just about going through the motions. It's about engaging in deliberate practice.
Okay, so deliberate practice, pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zones, constantly striving for improvement.
Exactly. Approaching repetition with intention, mindfulness, and that growth mindset.
Right. And it's also important to remember that true mastery doesn't happen overnight. It takes consistent effort, patience, a willingness to embrace the whole process.
You got it. And, we talked about those bumps in the road.
The frustration, the boredom, the inevitable setbacks.
Exactly. But the key is to just keep going, trust the process, and celebrate those small victories along the way.
Don't get discouraged if you don't see immediate results because it's a cumulative process.
That's right.
Every step, no matter how small, contributes to the bigger picture.
It's like building a house,
Oh, yeah, I like that.
Each brick might seem insignificant on its own, but together,
they create something amazing.
Exactly. Strong and lasting.
Okay, so how can we apply these principles to other goals in our lives? How do we make repetition work for us practically?
We'll start by identifying those areas where you want to see growth, and then break down those larger goals into smaller, manageable steps you can practice regularly.
So if you're learning a new language, maybe focus on a few new words each day, or try having short conversations.
Exactly. And remember those principles of deliberate practice. Challenge yourself, seek feedback, and constantly refine your approach.
Don't be afraid to experiment. Try different approaches. See what sticks.
And remember, making mistakes is part of the learning process.
Absolutely. Failure is just an opportunity to learn and adjust course.
It's all part of the journey.
As we wrap up our deep dive into the power of repetition, any final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I would ask, what's one small change you can make today to bring more deliberate repetition into your life?
Maybe setting aside 15 minutes each day to practice a new skill or revisit a challenging concept, or even just committing to a new habit, no matter how small.
Whatever it is, make that commitment to yourself and trust that the power of repetition will guide you towards growth, mastery, and a more fulfilling life.
I think that's a great note to end on.
I agree.
This has been such an insightful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise.
The pleasure was all mine. Thanks for having me.
And for our listeners who want to explore this topic further, be sure to check out the show notes for a link to that Algo Academy blog article that we mentioned and all the other resources that we talked about today.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep repeating.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.